Joni Mitchell carried a secret that would have ruined her career for 32 years. Something happened in 1965 that she was unable to discuss. Not to her closest friends, not to her parents, and not to her admirers. Instead, she channeled her grief into her music. Without knowing the reality, millions of people suddenly sang along to both sides. She eventually spoke up in 1996. Everyone was surprised by what she disclosed. However, the true tragedy occurred when she attempted to make amends for the past. On November 7, 1943, Joni Mitchell was born in Fort Macleod, Alberta. She was Roberta Joan Anderson in full. Life wasn't easy right from the beginning. In the Royal Canadian Air Force, her father, Bill Anderson, was a flight lieutenant. The family frequently traveled from post to base across Canada as a result of his work. Myrtle, her mother, was a school teacher, attempting to maintain a semblance of order. However, Joni never felt like she belonged anyplace because of the frequent moves. She constantly had to adjust because she was the new kid. She would carry this sense of homelessness with her and use it to greatly influence her paintings. Her lyrics about identity and longing later reflected this early restlessness. Joni contracted polio in 1953 when she was 9 years old. Back then, it was a horrifying disease. She was separated from her loved ones for weeks while she was in the hospital. Her back was twisted by the illness, and she suffered from agony for the remainder of her life. She would also experience post-polio syndrome years later, which returned with exhaustion and weakness. She learned how fleeting life can be from that battle with polio, but it also strengthened her on the inside. That battle is audible in her music, in her singing about struggle and survival. Joni did something unexpected during that same trying moment. She began smoking when she was just 9 years old and still recuperating from polio. When everything else seemed out of her control, it was her way of rebelling and taking charge. Her voice was unaffected by the habit, though. Even as a child, the voice became one of the most distinctive and renowned in music. She displayed the audacity that would characterize her whole career. She never found school to be easy. Regular studies didn't appeal to Joni, but she developed a passion for painting. She really came into her own there. Her first thought was that she was a painter, and her love of color and detail influenced her songwriting. Her visual sense persisted in her music, even when she attended art school to hone her skills. Her albums felt like works of art, and her lyrics painted pictures. Joni took a risk while she was in grade 12. She left school. That decision put her in danger. She discovered that she was spending time with people who were in trouble with the authorities. Later on, she acknowledged that she became too close to that world. However, even throughout that difficult time, she collected anecdotes and emotions that would eventually be incorporated into her songs. She managed to put herself together somehow, and she decided to pursue music as her path. Joni was a 19-year-old Calgary art student in 1964. She became pregnant as her life took yet another difficult turn. She was abandoned by the baby's father, a fellow student. All he could do was give her a poem. That was it. No assistance, no backing. At a time when society was harsh to women in her circumstances, Joni was left all by herself to deal with the guilt and anxiety of being a single mother. When Kelly Dale Anderson, her daughter, was born, she didn't tell anyone. Not even her parents were aware. That was the extent of the 1960s fear of shame. Joni struggled alone through all the pain and anxiety, concealing the pregnancy and the birth. She ultimately had to make the most difficult decision of her life. Her infant was placed for adoption. It broke her. According to her friend Lori Wilson, Joni had a terrible time. Despite her intense grief, she could see no other option. There was no money, no father to support them, and the burden of social criticism was excessive. She carried that sadness with her, and it influenced who she is now. It added depth and honesty to her songs. Since Joni was unable to publicly discuss the pain, she channeled it into her music. She began giving performances in coffee cafes, bringing her sorrow to each song. Her strength came from that grief. It gave her art a strength that made her unique. It gave her songs a genuine and intimate quality. Her boldness and rawness became hallmarks of her style, and it encouraged other artists to follow suit. Joni Mitchell was only 21 years old at the beginning of 1965. She was attempting to succeed as a folk singer while residing in Toronto. She was also dealing with the unpleasant realities of being an unmarried mother at the same time. She gave birth to a girl called Kelly Dale Anderson in a culture that constantly criticized her. She was being crushed by the embarrassment and the pressure. She met Chuck Mitchell that March at the Penny Farthing, a tiny folk club, was 29 tall, self-assured, and already involved in the folk scene in New York. From the beginning, their meeting was intense. During his performance, Joni informed him that he had mispronounced the lyrics to a Bob Dylan song. Chuck felt pulled to her spirit rather than angered. He proposed to her in less than 36 hours. After 2 months of waiting, they were married in June 1965. Joni hoped that this marriage would help her reunite with her foster daughter. Chuck appeared to be her greatest chance for stability, something she desperately needed. However, what initially appeared to be salvation quickly changed. It was not love that led to the marriage. Chuck's assurances and Joni's need gave rise to it. He promised to assist her in getting her daughter back. However, following the wedding, that pledge, their careers came into focus. In the end, Kelly was placed for adoption. Joni concealed that heartache for many years. She was troubled by the loss of Kelly and the sense of betrayal she experienced from Chuck. More grief resulted from what she had imagined would bring her peace. Chuck did more than fail to assist Joni. He exacerbated the situation. He made fun of Joni as she performed her new song, Both Sides Now. He made her feel insignificant. That tune, which the world would come to adore and commemorate, was rejected by the guy she believed she could rely on. She felt rattled by his criticism. Chuck repeatedly undermined her self-confidence. Their finances were under his control. In order to prevent her from shining alone, he made sure they performed as a duo. He didn't want Joni's star to surpass his own, and he didn't want to raise someone else's child. Joni felt confined. She had married him in the hopes of becoming free, but instead she was left with. Less than 2 years into her traumatic marriage, Joni departed in 1967. That year, the divorce was finalized. After packing, she drove to New York City by herself. Everything changed because of that drive. She discovered her voice on her own in a city full with dreamers and artists. She discovered her strength. Although they didn't go away, the wounds from her relationship with Chuck helped to mold her. Her music's unadulterated honesty came from them. They aided her in developing into the internationally acclaimed artist she is today. Mitchell, Joni, their heartache into songs that millions of people could relate to. She also started the road that would make her a legend by leaving Chuck. Something unforeseen that would forever alter music occurred in the fall of 1967. After being expelled from the Byrds, David Crosby ended up walking into the Gaslight, a tiny bar in Coconut Grove, Florida. Joni Mitchell, a young Canadian, appeared on that stage. Crosby was astounded when he heard her sing. "It was like tumbling into a cement mixer," he said, remarked. The force of her words and voice engulfed him. This gathering was not informal. Both as a relationship and as an artist, Crosby fell in love with her. He persuaded her to travel to California with him. There, he assisted her in signing with Reprise Records and produced Song to a Seagull, her debut album, which was released in March 1968. Crosby desired a pristine sound for everything, and organic. To capture the organic echoes, he even had her sing into a grand piano's open lid. Although there was some tape hiss in the finished recording, the end result was a lovely raw sound. In addition to starting a career, that Florida night forged a collaboration that influenced a generation's musical tastes. Though not yet in her own voice, Joni Mitchell's songs were already becoming popular before most people even knew who she was. Her genius was recognized by other artists in the mid-1960s. In 1967, Judy Collins made Both Sides, now a top 10 hit in the United States and the United Kingdom, while Tom Rush popularized the circle game. Collins also recorded Chelsea Morning. Her songs were also covered by Dave Van Ronk and Fairport Convention. Urge for Going even became well known thanks to Tom Rush. Joni was able to gain the respect she required thanks to these covers. Her songs were already well known in the folk music scene by 1968 when she released Song to a Seagull. Before the majority of her followers had even heard her voice, she had already gained the right to be creative. When Joni's second album, Clouds, was released on May Honest, 1969, it completely transformed her life. The album peaked at number 22 in Canada and number 31 in the U.S. Billboard 200 thanks to hits like Chelsea Morning and Both Sides Now. The Grammy Awards in 1970 were the big event. The Best Folk Performance went to Clouds. At the time, Joni was among the few female recipients of this honor. Her growth was evident on the record. The lyrics were more intimate. More audacious was the music. On Rolling Stone's list of the 500 best songs, Both Sides would eventually be rated 170 honest. Never. Not only did she receive a trophy from that Grammy, but it also allowed her to experiment and take chances with her music. Joni became a real success after releasing Ladies of the Canyon in April 1970. It earned platinum after peaking at number 27 on the Billboard 200. Songs from it are still popular today. Woodstock, Big Yellow Taxi, and the circle game Big Yellow Taxi were all global hits. It peaked at number 6 in Australia, number 11 in the UK, and number 15 in Canada. The album demonstrated Joni's ability to create something fresh by fusing rock, pop, and folk. This was the sound of an artist at the height of her abilities, not just another folk CD. Joni entered a world of music legends when she relocated to Laurel Canyon in the late 1960s. Graham Nash's song, Our House, made her home at 82,117 Lookout Mountain Avenue famous. Creativity was thriving in the canyon. Nearby musicians included Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. They were each other's inspiration. Together, they composed tunes. This extraordinary bunch of artists gathered at Joni's residence. The music of the 1970s was influenced by the friendships and teamwork that developed there. At the center of it all was Joni. Joni left the limelight behind and began touring Europe in 1970. spent time in the village of Matala on the Greek island of Crete. She lived quietly there, surrounded by travelers and artists who stayed in seaside caverns. Her second record would be influenced by the sound she created when she learned to play the Appalachian dulcimer. She penned the songs California and Carrie in Matala, which perfectly encapsulated the essence of her adventure. She found a new voice at this period in Europe, which would eventually result in her masterwork. June 1971 saw the release of that masterwork. Blue was the name of it. The CD was honest and unvarnished. According to Joni, she felt as though she had no more secrets. The songs dealt with love, heartbreak, and self-discovery. They resulted from her time spent in Europe and her complex connections with James Taylor and Graham Nash. Only her voice, a piano, and a guitar made up the straightforward music, or a dulcimer. The feelings were heightened by that simplicity, shown to the world what it meant to use music to genuinely open your heart. Blue was successful right away. It placed in the top 20 on the Billboard 200 in the United States. It rose all the way to number 3 in the UK. For a folk record released in the early 1970s, that was enormous. Blue eventually achieved a platinum certification and sold over 1 million copies. It was praised by critics. By 2020, it had risen to 3rd place. NPR even named it the best album ever created by a woman. The power of Blue stems from its honesty. The songs still speak to people today, and musicians of many genres continue to learn from them. Among its 10 tracks, 2 stand out as genuine classics. A Case of You is a heartfelt, painful look at love. The remark, "I could drink a case of you and still be on my feet," has moved people for decades. Musicians ranging from Prince to Diana Krall have covered it. River begins by saying that it is almost Christmas and that they are cutting down trees. It drags listeners into its world of grief and longing. Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark was released on January 17, 1974. It changed everything for her. This CD moved her away from the folk music she began with. She transitioned to a softer, jazz-influenced pop sound. The change was not minor. It shook up her career. The album reached number 2 on the US charts and number 1 in Canada. It sold more than 2 million copies worldwide, making it her best-selling album to date. The single, Me, peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. That was her only US top 10 hit. Free Man in Paris, inspired by David Geffen's hardships in the music industry, peaked at number 22 on the Hot 100 and number 2 on the Adult Contemporary chart. Her music became so sophisticated that normal rock bands were unable to manage it.